I'd like to start by giving the audience a little bit of background on what the Postal Service really is and what we do, just so you can understand a little bit better as far as the scope of our operations. We deliver 213 billion pieces of mail every year. Over 9 million people conduct business in our 37,000 post offices nationally every day. We're now the second largest employer in the country. For a long time we were number one, but a couple of years ago we relinquished that title to Walmart, and actually we're looking at moving further down the scale, really. So we're not embarrassed or trying to retake number one at all. The Postal Service owns and operates 220,000 vehicles, and I'll give you a little bit more of a breakdown of those in just a couple of minutes. Last fiscal year we drove 1.2 billion miles, and we used over 121 million gallons of fuel to do that. And you don't have to be real good at math to figure out that that's 10 miles to the gallon, roughly. And a lot of people, in fact, I've just seen it here in the last 15 seconds, you know, they really take a gasp or roll their eyes when you say 10 miles to the gallon. Well, you have to remember, again, how we operate our fleet. We're not running up and down the interstate. We're operating for the most part, in severely restricted urban and suburban environment. When we're going on what we call a mounted route, where we're delivering to mailboxes, we're driving the vehicles 100 feet and stop, 100 feet and stop, 100 feet and stop, 700 times a day, 7 hours a day. So that type of operation is not conducive to good fuel economy. There we go. Also want to frame it out by letting you know that what we do and how we accomplish it isn't through the use or the receiving end of any congressional appropriations or taxpayer subsidies. What we do, we depend on our own revenues of what we generate in order to meet and sustain our operations. Ms. Pope touched a little bit on some of our history, and she went into a lot more detail than what I'm going to, because I'll defer to the expert. I know when I've met my match or been beat in this regard. We did have our first electric vehicle back in 1899, and if Ms. Pope hadn't been here, I'd have to reassure the audience that that's not a typo. It was 1899, not 1999. We do operate the largest alternative fuel capable vehicle fleet in the world, over 142,000 vehicles. We have vehicles operating on just about every type of alternative fuel that's in existence today. The Postal Service has received 35 White House Closing the Circle awards for our environmental programs nationally. Our vehicles may lead the way, but within the Postal Service, the alternative fuels and what they contribute is just a part of our overall desire to be good environmental neighbors and to a degree corporate leaders in the way we have fuel efficient buildings. We are major recyclers, and we're working with our mailing industry each and every day on better ways and techniques of greening the mail. This is the fleet as it stands today that we spoke about. The majority of our alternative fuel vehicles are up here in this top line. These are the vehicles that do the primary delivery in our residential neighborhoods and bring the mails to your homes 6 days a week. But we don't stop right there. We have vehicles or alternative fuel vehicles in the 1 and 2 ton category. We've got a number of electrics vehicles there that are operating in Manhattan. We have some of the first what are now ultra-low sulfur diesels, cargo vans that have been operating in Southern California now for going on 6 years, which was well in advance of the legal requirement. We have alternative fuel tractors and other vehicles down through there in our support and administrative vehicles as well. I also like to show you a couple other different ways that we deliver the mail. It's not all just in the burbs. If anyone takes offense to the bush planes, that's not a slap or a slant on the administration. It's simply the vernacular of remote areas in which we have to deliver the mails in some locations. In addition to Alaska and Hawaii, obviously, as states, we also deliver the mail in the U.S. territories of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam. You know, these are some of the green ways that we do it, or greener ways. We still have active bicycle routes in Arizona and Florida. And these are the normal modes of transportation for these letter carriers. They don't just use bicycles on the sunny days and when it's 60 degrees outside. If it's 100 degrees or if it's a rainy day, there's not a vehicle parked out there for them to use instead of the bicycle. They still use the bicycle. Some of the locations that we deliver the mail to aren't accessible by land, so we have to use boats. Not only in the Great Lakes, but also in other parts of the country as well. And now we're getting, real earthy. There is a tribe of Indians that live in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and they depend on the mail service to supply their daily food, not only their mail, but also their substance to exist is brought down along with the mail on mules and pack horses into the Grand Canyon. And the greenest way we deliver the mail is by foot. We actually have about 11 or 12,000 foot routes where there's actually no vehicle at all assigned to the route. The carrier simply has their mail and they walk out to the surrounding areas or around the post office. We get exposed to a lot of good ideas, and we owe it not only to ourselves but to the mailing public to make sure that we do our due diligence as far as investigating anything that may have the feasibility and possibility of helping us improve our operations. But sometimes they don't always work. Whoop, wrong way. That one always works. Remember the Segway? We tried those out about 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, we were one of their initial customers, and we worked very closely with the company. Had a number of design and engineering changes made to help make the vehicle more user-friendly from a postal perspective. But unfortunately, it just wasn't something that we could make work, despite everybody's real efforts to do so. That was due in part to some of those were operational issues, having to, how do we deal with, curbs? We can't very well have carriers, jumping curbs and things like that, especially in older neighborhoods where they haven't made the handicap accessible ramps in yet and things of that nature. But there are also other federal, state, and municipal issues about having, at least on a sidewalk, if, they would consider this a motorized vehicle, and having that on a sidewalk with pedestrians. They say, put it in the street beside the sidewalk. Well, if you put it in the street beside the sidewalk, then it becomes subject to the federal motor vehicle safety standards, and it doesn't have lights, it doesn't have windshield wipers, it did have a horn, but that was about as far as it went. So it was a good idea. It just wasn't quite the right application for us. But other technologies do seem to have promise for us, and we're looking at those very hard. And this is something that Jerry touched about. This is we have a partnership with General Motors. This is their second generation or third generation hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. We've had a rental or lease agreement with them for hydrogen fuel cells for now 4 or 5 years. We've had the vehicles in demonstration and use here in the metropolitan Washington area, as well as in Southern California. The vehicles that we take delivery of this summer will also be in Washington, D.C. and in Southern California as well. But let's get to the crux of the matter as far as how we deal with some of the issues that we have to confront. It is difficult out there, and Jerry in his analogy used the chicken and egg. My analogy is more of a field of dreams sometimes, and such that it's not always if you build it they will come. Again, Jerry talked about the Energy Policy Act. It was originally enacted in 1992. It was later revised in 2005. It does require that all executive federal agencies that acquire vehicles under 8,500 pounds of gross vehicle weight, 75% of those vehicles have to be capable of operating on a recognized alternative fuel. You can see the list of the fuels that are included. Interestingly enough, hybrids were not added until the 2005 revision, and that was only after extensive lobbying and consultation efforts by the industry and by other groups outside of Congress. Really did some serious arm twisting on that. And as it says there, it does only apply to the executive branch. And therein lies part of the problems. It doesn't apply to the general public. So it's largely unknown outside of the executive branch agencies. Jerry touched on the lack of uniform fuel infrastructure. Right now, there's 170, 180,000 commercial gas stations nationally. My number is a little bit different. It's about there are about 1,500 E85 stations now nationally, but I can tell you that today, out of over 30,000 E85 capable vehicles, only about less than 3,000 of ours have available infrastructure to use the fuel. And these are vehicles, even as Jerry's map showed, that are domiciled in the Midwest where there is a predominance of fuel. There's just not the accessibility, that we need. My reference there to minimal industry interest has to do with the fact that there are just too many choices almost out there right now. There's not a clear direction. People are trying to be slaves to too many masters, and there's just not a common work through there. The EPAC doesn't recognize our operational restrictions from a Postal Service perspective. It doesn't help us deal with companies such as the Ford Motor Company because while Jerry has expressed, and I believe when they have an interest in working with the Postal Service, Detroit builds 15 to 16 million vehicles a year in a bad year, in a bad economy. We've got a fleet of 200,000 vehicles. As much as they value our business, they've got to look beyond that 220,000 vehicles because there's a much greater customer base out there that they have to successfully reach out to. And the burning desire for us has always been and will continue to be in large part the right-hand drive vehicles. That's our bread and butter. And when we start having to deal with what fuel we're going to use and what the vehicle configuration is, it really makes life very complicated for us because it really minimizes our choices from an acquisition perspective. These are the things that we're combating right now. keep on harping on the lack of infrastructure. We need more of it. There's no such thing as too much. There are conflicting national policies, laws, and regulations. At the same time that EPACT was enacted in 1992, the Federal Clean Air Act was passed. EPACT is an executive order signed by the President. It has some penalties, but the Clean Air Act is the national law of the land, and it has stiffer penalties. I can get slapped for not using or abiding by EPACT. I can be put in jail for not abiding with the Clean Air Act. So there's not much decision to be made there. There are also issues with, we have to deal with reducing fuel consumption, reducing fuel dependency, as well as improving the emissions. And all three of those, they may sound alike, but there are subtle but distinct differences between all three of them, and they don't always work in concert with each other. Fuel du jour, outside of ethanol, the hybrid activity and the hydrogen activity, other alternative fuels are basically stagnant at this point in time. CNG is becoming a non-entity. It's becoming more and more difficult for us to keep our 3,500 CNG vehicles operating. Again, both from a maintenance and a parts standpoint as well as from a fuel standpoint. It's from our standpoint, we may end up, ideally we would like to look at having regional-based vehicles where we could take advantage of the fuel strengths throughout the region of the country. Obviously, in the urban areas, the electric and hybrid type vehicles have a strong attractiveness for us. In the Southwest, CNG is very available and very reasonably priced. Same on the West Coast. And then, for other parts of the areas, we can, supplement those with gasoline and or other alternative fuels such as ethanol. And again, we have to rely on folks, for the right-hand drive vehicles and how do we cross that bridge, and at least in a North American environment. For the Postal Service to maintain its status as a greener fleet, we need that infrastructure. We need stable fuel prices. All of us as individual consumers have seen what gasoline has done over the last 3 or 4 months. Every time gasoline or every time fuel goes up 1 penny, it costs the Postal Service $8 million in additional expense annually. So, gasoline, fuel has gone up, 50 cents since the first of the year. That's a lot of money, and we have to deal with it. We need to continue to rely on the vehicle manufacturers that can meet our requirements. We need their level of technology and support to help us get to those next levels. And here's an important part. We need comparably priced vehicles. And this goes back somewhat to the Volt scenario, if you will. An average E85 capable minivan or sedan, I'll stay with a minivan because that's what we need from an operational standpoint, costs something just under $20,000 now in the U.S. The Postal Service, if we can afford to buy, a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid at $35,000 to $40,000 a vehicle, we'll never get the payback on it. We don't drive enough. While we may drive 1.2 billion miles a year, our average delivery vehicle goes just over 5,000 miles a year. We'll never get the investment back in the difference between the gasoline price vehicle and the equivalent hybrid in that kind of a market. thankfully, at least on smaller scales today, grant money, subsidies through energy companies and things like that are available, and they're much appreciated and help us do a lot of the projects that we do. But on a wide scale, we have to have vehicles available to us that are mainstream and competitively priced on a gasoline equivalent basis. Thank you.